Thank you, Mr. President, and to my friend who just spoke a little bit ago from Oklahoma, absolutely I'm aware of the quantity and the value of Alaska oil and gas, and today I rise to discuss this issue as well as a few others related to the issues of oil and gas. I rise today to discuss an issue foremost on the minds of my constituents and the concern to all Americans, the rising cost of energy. I want to outline the proposals aimed at providing short-term relief for high prices at the pump and to assure America's long-term energy security. These are the issues which have been discussed many times in these chambers. The time for talk is past. The time to act is now, Mr. President. High energy prices today already are pinching pocketbooks of families and crippling our small businesses across my state and across this country. When I was home over the recess, I visited the roaded areas of Alaska. These are communities connected by our highway and road system, from Kenai Peninsula to Fairbanks, where gas prices were well over $4 a gallon. As you can see by the poster next to me, they ranged from $4.15 a gallon to $4.35 a gallon. These prices might look good to some of my colleagues who saw gas prices over $5 a gallon in their home states, but off the road system in Alaska, prices are much, much higher. The fact is, prices for gasoline and home heating oil never came down in rural Alaska. They've been well over $5 a gallon for years. Some places, such as Anatuvik Pass, are nearly $10 a gallon. I started a discussion with Alaskans on Facebook to just see how these high prices are affecting their budgets. Some families are already facing really tough choices to make their budgets balance. For families commuting into Anchorage from Mat-Su Valley every day, they are forced to pay more than $100 a week to fuel up. That's more than a pocketbook pinch, it's a punch. And even worse, families know the price isn't coming down anytime soon, and even though speculation ranges all over the place, prices are still expected to rise 30 to 40 cents, probably by July. And it's not just affecting families, it's affecting businesses. They feel the sticker shock also at the pump. We're seeing businesses through rising food and delivery prices to make up the difference. These families and businesses expect us to act now, no more excuses. Energy is one place where we should be able to find bipartisan common ground. I've been calling for a comprehensive energy bill from day one in the Senate. Our lack of progress on this is frustrating. We were real close last spring, but now here we are again. We need to provide Americans reliable and affordable energy in three ways: short-term relief for consumers, new renewable energy sources for reliable electricity prices, and keep strong investment in alternative transportation systems, and increase domestic oil and gas production so we're not dependent on unfriendly foreign sources. First, the short term, which I call the pocketbook relief. We must help families keep their budgets balanced and help ensure that increasing consumer confidence doesn't falter. To that, I've introduced a family account to save on transportation, the FAST Act, to help families get through the high gas prices over the next 2 years. This bill will allow employers to set up pre-tax transportation savings account, just like medical savings accounts, to help offset the pain of high gas prices on the family pocketbook. The bill will sunset in 2 years, so it will have no long-term burden on the federal budget. Second, we have to bring online alternative power sources to buffer power companies from price shocks of rising oil and gas prices. No matter where you are in Alaska, you don't have to go far to find alternative energy sources: wind and tidal, geothermal and hydro. Even in these tough budget times, this is a good investment to strengthen our economy far into the future. The same is true for alternative transportation systems and fuels. We must fully support efforts to develop electric, hybrid, and highly efficient vehicles. At the same time, we must recognize most working families cannot afford to purchase a new vehicle. So we need to find other ways to reduce their transportation costs, such as greater investment into city-to-city commuter services. The recent investment in high-speed rail is positive, but is not reaching most of the country and will not. Even in Alaska, we have the potential for commuter rail. It is critical to move commuters from city to city and cutting the $100 a week gas prices that our folks from Matsu pay as they drive into Anchorage for employment. Solving our energy security challenge cannot just focus on reducing consumption. Yes, it's important, but we must cut the use, as is identified through consumption, that we need to reduce fossil fuels in all sectors, especially transportation. But we also need to increase our domestic production. Every new oil and gas development buys our country more energy security and national security, while also creating American jobs. Unfortunately, we're going in the wrong direction. 30 years ago, 28% of our oil was imported. Today, 60%. And while our largest share of oil imports come from Canada, too much is coming from unstable countries or those openly hostile to the United States. Not only will we become increasingly dependent on these countries for our oil, but we are exporting over $1 billion a day. Let me repeat that, $1 billion a day we export. In my home state, Alaska, we have vast potential to increase America's energy security. The fact is, developing Alaska's oil and gas resources buys our country decades of energy security by offsetting foreign imports from unfriendly countries. Consider a few examples, which I have here on the board next to me. Developing offshore resources in the Chukchi, up in this area, in the Beaufort Sea, will produce 1.8 million barrels of oil a day. This is easily enough to offset oil imports from Saudi Arabia. You could even cover Iraq too. Developing the oil beneath the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, ANWR, could offset imports from Nigeria. Developing the CD5 project in the National Petroleum Reserve, Alaska. Let me repeat that again. The National Petroleum Reserve, Alaska, set up for petroleum products and production. And BP's Liberty project could replace daily imports from Libya. This does not even include the tremendous on and offshore natural gas resources we have in Alaska. 1/3 of the country's supply in Alaska. So why aren't we developing these enormous resources in my state? 2 words: politics and bureaucrats. Mr. President, earlier this year, President Obama went to Brazil, where he declared that America wants to be a customer for Brazilian oil and natural gas. I got to say, you don't need to go too far. You don't need to go to Brazil to do that. You can do it right here in Alaska with our people, our resources, our opportunities. I remind the President of that, and I'll remind him on a regular basis. To his credit, I will say later in the month, he did mention Alaska. Alaska, in his call for energy and domestic energy independence, he mentioned Alaska. Unfortunately, the bureaucrats in his administration are not listening. They are tossing up barriers and additional Alaskan oil and gas production every chance they get. Sadly, some of my colleagues in this body are not much better. Instead of addressing the problem with specific solutions, they are going for headlines by dragging energy company executives before committees or promising the roadblocks or proposing that roadblock incentives for increased domestic energy production, some of which have been on the books for decades. Let's stop the headline grabbing and get serious about the energy security. I have 3 ideas. First, better coordinate the federal offshore permitting process. I introduced legislation before recess to create the Arctic OCS coordinated model after legislation that late Senator Ted Stevens passed, establishing the Federal Gas Pipeline Coordinator. My bill addresses the problem too many projects are caught in. What I call the...
It's currently used 7 minutes.
I'd ask for an additional 3 minutes.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
My bill addresses the problem too many projects are caught in, what I call the regulatory whack-a-mole. You think you have smacked down one regulatory hurdle and another one pops up. This bill gives authority to work across the agencies causing companies so much heartburn today. The EPA, Army Corps of Engineers, Interior Department, just to name a few. Second, let's align the clean air standards for offshore drilling permits among the affected federal agencies. We must have a level playing field whether you are in Alaska or the Gulf of Mexico or the eastern United States. As my colleague from Louisiana knows, who's here joining on the floor, Louisiana has one rule, Alaska has another rule for the same issue. Third, let's invest in American transportation and safety infrastructure to develop oil and gas resources in frontier areas. The fact is we need a far greater Coast Guard presence in the Arctic for oil spill prevention and response. We also need to invest in our pipeline infrastructure, including the Alaska natural gas line, to move oil and gas resources from the Arctic to other U.S. regions. There's a lot of talk right now about ending tax incentives for oil and gas industry. With the high profits right now, these companies are easy targets. But one thing Alaskans know, just because you have an easy target doesn't mean it's the right thing to shoot. It won't decrease gas prices at the pump for our families and our small businesses. It will discourage companies, especially the independents, from domestic investment and job creation. As someone who represents a state with the highest energy prices in the country and some of the best renewable and traditional energy resources, I'm ready to join my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to address America's energy needs now. We need to set a hard target. That is why I'm asking my colleagues to get serious about real energy plan and give Americans freedom from high gas prices by the 4th of July. Let's work together, roll up our sleeves, and pass a real comprehensive energy plan our families and our small businesses can get behind. And let's finally invest in our future energy and put the reforms in place to ensure long-term energy security. Mr. President, I recognize my colleague from Louisiana, another great state of oil and gas development. He's here on the floor with me, and I yield the floor at this time.